Hello, everyone. We'll get started here just in a minute. I'm just gonna let more people join. All right, let's get this started. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. I hope everyone is having a fantastic Tuesday. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to join us for the webinar. My name is Allison Davis. I'm the campaigns manager for Big Animal, EDB's cloud database offering. In today's webinar, we will discuss key considerations when choosing a Postgres vendor in the cloud. Together, we will investigate and understand cloud database providers' offerings and their risks associated with support, services, technology stagnation, cost, and lock-in. Now, before I introduce you to our speaker, please note the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom window. If you have any questions for us about the presentation during the presentation, feel free to ask us. We will get to it at the end of this presentation. So without further ado, I would like to introduce today's speaker, Mark Linster, our Chief Technology Officer here at EDB. Over to you, Mark.
Thanks, Allison. Thank you for the introduction. Again, thanks everybody for joining us today. So as Allison said, we'll talk about choosing the right Postgres vendor in the cloud. So we'll talk about the risks, but also the mitigation strategies. So what do you need to do to avoid those risks? Okay. And, just to kind of liven it up a little bit, what you're really going to learn about is what zombies, gravity, Hotel California all have to do with choosing the right cloud vendor. So from a content perspective, we'll just briefly touch on Postgres, briefly touch on EDB, promise won't be more than a couple of minutes, and then talk about the move to the cloud, why people are going, and the risks that you have to be aware of when you go to the cloud. I mean, the move to the cloud has been going on for quite a while, so it's not new territory. There have been a lot of successes. There's been some failures. There's now some well-published papers on, or well-read papers on, maybe you shouldn't go to the cloud whole hog. There are disadvantages, etc. So we're going to walk you through that. Our experience of having done this with customers now for quite a few years. So let me get started here. First, share my excitement about Postgres, right? As you can imagine from EDB, the Postgres company, that we're very, very excited about Postgres. Just a few data points. And as Allison said, you'll get those slides afterwards if you want them. So it'll be easy for you to follow the details here. What's interesting here is when you look at Docker, the number of companies that are running Postgres in the cloud, and this red box should be around Postgres, not around Redis. So, Postgres is the #1 real database running in containers today. So that's the first thing. So for very advanced technologies, Postgres is the #1 choice. If you look at the cloud native computing's technology radar, right? Then also Postgres is the #1 real database. I mean, I don't consider Elasticsearch and Redis really databases. I mean, they're very good technologies, but I wouldn't call them databases. But again, so in containers, in Kubernetes, they're #1 recommendations. If you look at the Stack Overflow 2022 developer survey, you'll see that for the first time this year or last year now, Postgres in all categories, most loved, most wanted, and most used, has been #1. Before that, you always had to kind of add up the numbers for most loved, most wanted, most used to see Postgres emerge as the #1. This year, Postgres has been the #1 in all categories. And then, Database Management System of the Year, it's won that award numerous times. So we're really convinced that Postgres is the most transformative open source technology since Linux. And that's, what brings us into this type of conversation. So once you've accepted Postgres in that role, a quick introduction about EDB. We've been involved with the Postgres community, a very vibrant community with lots of participants. We've been driving Postgres together with many others for quite a few years. I mean, in fact, since 2005. Okay? And important is when you work with us, you have access to the people who do that. Not just people who use Postgres, but actually people who build Postgres. And we've been doing this for quite a few years. I mean, since version 8, I think that's about when we got involved with it, version 7 or version 8. We've been involved in investing in Postgres significantly. Developers from EDB created things like heap-only tuples or HOT, right? Barman, PG Logical, auto-index on partition tables, or now really, really interesting in version 15, which just came out, the merge command for Postgres, something that developers have had available to them in Oracle for quite a few years, and now it's available in Postgres too. And all of these things are developed by EDB team members. It doesn't mean that others are not working on Postgres, but just means that we're investing significantly and really are focusing a lot on the work that we do in the Postgres community. So, and part of what we do is make sure that Postgres runs everywhere. So not just on-prem, which is where we started, and probably all of us started, but also runs in the public cloud on AWS, on Azure, soon on GCP, so that you can run applications everywhere. So we're not just developing Postgres to run on-prem, we're really driving Postgres also into hybrid, multi-cloud, and private cloud type of environments. Okay. So important is that gives you the Postgres that you need. And that Postgres comes in many, many flavors, or as we call them, distributions. PostgreSQL, the open source version, EDB Postgres Advanced Server, the native Oracle compatibility version, and Postgres Extended, which is what is used for extreme high availability, with the tool that used to be called BDR is now called Postgres Distributed. Okay, so we're bringing our Postgres expertise to bear for a long time, on-prem and in the cloud, with different distributions, some pure open source, some focused on Oracle compatibility, some focused on extreme high availability. And just a few numbers, very, very well used among the Fortune 500 customers. Lots of customers today. As I said, we've been in this business for 18 years now. If you look at the Postgres 15 statistics, the people that have actively contributed to the latest version of Postgres, you'll see that nobody has more active contributors than EDB. We've had 41 people actively contribute to open source Postgres last year. For Postgres 14, the version before, 30% of all the lines of code that were contributed to Postgres 14 came from EDB. And today we're a good sized company. We have over 300 people who do nothing else but work on Postgres. Okay, so let's talk about the move to the cloud. And this is true not just for Postgres, but it's true in general for the move to the cloud. But I think it's important to understand the drivers in order to assess the risks properly. This is a quote from a customer, where the customer said, hey, it takes us 52 days to provision a new database server. That has to come down to hours and minutes. And I think that's one of the key drivers why people go to the cloud: agility. Yes, cost is often mentioned, but agility, the ability to move fast, is really, really what's important. Innovation, I think, comes next. And because it's so easy to try something new in the cloud, try it in a project, not just an experiment. And if it works, great, use it more. If it doesn't work, well, stop using it. Those are things that really are very difficult to do on-prem. And then we have data center closures. A lot of customers are motivated to go to the cloud because they want to get rid of their own real estate, of their own data centers. And especially in global markets, many customers have to do that because it's almost impossible to cover the globe through proprietary data centers. It's just too slow. It takes too long. You get into a new geography that has specific compliance rules. And if you need to build your own data centers, it's going to take you 3, 4, 5 years before you thrive in that geography. If you go to the cloud, you can be there much, much faster. Okay. And then the last thing that's not often talked about, but I think it's important, and you'll see it come back in the risk assessment, is you focus your own in-house resources on value-add innovation activities, meaning you take people who today do a very valuable job of keeping the data center up and running, making sure that backups happen, that failovers happen, all that kind of stuff, and you can move those to innovation jobs, right? Innovation roles. So you can take a lot more of your manpower and focus it again on what we have on the left side of this slide, agility and innovation, instead of just keeping the lights on. Okay, so these are really the reasons why people move to the cloud from our experience. Now, what are the risks? Let's get to the real topic of today's presentation. We think, or I think, there are 5 things that somebody who moves to the cloud needs to be aware of. There's a support risk. So, you know, like when you go to the cloud, can you actually get the help that you need? You probably need more than just support, which is bug fix and advice. You probably also need service. You know, somebody help you implement things. You have to be aware of the risk of technology stagnation, right? Because that's really orthogonal to or completely opposed to the desire to move fast and be agile. Cost. And cost is a really big thing when you go to the cloud. And I'll talk a little bit about why the cost concern needs to be front and center when you move to the cloud. I'm not saying don't go to the cloud, it's too expensive, but it is something that you really need to manage. And you'll see a new term crop up now, which is cloud FinOps. Okay, financial operations for people who really go to the cloud whole hog and need to keep control of the cost, because otherwise the ROI disappears. And then lock in. Okay, so those are the things that I'll talk about for the next 15, 20 minutes. Okay, so the first one, support risk. Okay, support means that you have somebody on the phone, on the other end, phone, web, whatever, chat, whatever interaction you choose, right? Who can help you and is available for you with real expertise. So really what you need is in-depth knowledge. You want somebody who knows how to fix bugs. Somebody who could potentially introduce new features that you need. Somebody who's really going to work with you. I mean, we have customers telling us, oh yeah, I called my cloud service provider. They run Postgres for us. I called them and said, I have a problem. And they were told, well, Postgres is running. You can reach it. What's the problem? Well, customer says, yesterday Postgres was fast. Today it is slow. Can you help me? No, you can't, because it's running. You can reach it. What's the problem? And that's not the type of expertise, I think, that most customers, especially those who believe that data is a differentiator, not a commodity, what they need, right? So what do you need to look for, especially around Postgres? Look whether the vendor that you're working with is actually participating in Postgres. And that's really important, because if somebody is not participating in Postgres, actively participating in the generation of Postgres as code, then they also cannot fix bugs for you. Postgres uses a hierarchy of committers and contributors, right? And if you're working with a vendor who has neither committers nor contributors, then they cannot get a fix into the Postgres code for you. They can give you advice, right? But if they're not actively working in Postgres, what do you know? Is the advice any good? So really research them. And we'll give you a tool here. I know this is a bit of an eye chart, I'll give you the detailed data for it too. This is an analysis that my colleague, Sarah Conway, who unfortunately cannot participate today, did, where she looked at who are all the people that contributed to Postgres 15, the version that just came out last quarter. Okay, and which are the companies that actually participated? And which of those companies have more than 2 people participating in Postgres? Because I think you need more than 2 people in order to understand what is now about 1,200,000 lines of code. And if you're a customer, you need to make sure that when you call and there's a real problem, that there are people on the other end of the phone line who can actually dig in and find the problem for you. It happens rarely. Postgres is very, very good, very mature, very stable software. But when it happens, you do need somebody who can dig into those lines of code and help you. Okay, you can't wait for a mailing list to somehow respond to a request and discuss it, etc. You can't wait. When that happens, and if it's the last day of the quarter, you know, every minute is actually 60 seconds, right? Every hour is 3,600 seconds when you wait for somebody to help you. So when you look for the right support partner, make sure that they're actively involved with Postgres. Don't get support from somebody who can just talk about Postgres. Okay, next one, service risk. Okay, when you do a Postgres project or a project with anything, Oracle, SQL Server, it doesn't really matter, right? You need more than support, right? If this is a mission critical project, well, you want to make sure that you have the right architecture and that you're working with somebody who can give you advice on the right architecture, who has consultants or systems integration expertise, somebody who can work with you to say, okay, in the cloud, here are your high availability options, whether you should go single region or multi-region, right? You may think, oh, that's trivial. I'll always go multi-region. Well, multi-region is very expensive because cloud service providers will charge you for data ingress and egress between regions. So, you know, work with somebody who can help you understand what is the right thing to do. Probably not all your databases will go to the cloud right away. So you have a hybrid database situation where some of your data sits on-prem and some of your data is in the cloud. You need the right advice and the right tools to make sure that you're not creating data islands. You know, hardware choices have always been very difficult. Now in the cloud, they're, I think, actually even more difficult. Like my colleague Tom Rieger, who just did a webinar, I think last week or the week before last, he did an analysis and says, hey, AWS, just AWS, offers you 55 compute types with 8 cores. Now, they also have compute types with 16 cores and 32 cores and 64 cores and 96 cores, etc. So there's hundreds of choices out there. And I'd highly recommend work with somebody who can help you pick the right compute type, the right storage, right? I mean, just even on Amazon, you have GP2, IO1, IO2, how many IOPS. I mean, again, get advice on database design, get proactive support. I mean, we at EDB, 7 years ago, have changed our support posture to say, call us often, call us early, because it's so much easier to work with a customer who's not in trouble, who has time to listen and do the right thing, than to work with somebody who's frantically trying to get a database up and running because of a design mistake that was done 6 months ago. Okay. And then think about the fact you may need help with monitoring of bloat and indexes and all that kind of stuff like that. Okay. So those are the risks around service. How do you mitigate them? Well, you have 2 choices. You can find the vendor who does it all, kind of like a Swiss Army knife, right? A single partner. Advantage is there's no finger pointing. You usually get to market much faster because you don't have to deal with, oh, this vendor said that. The guys who installed the product did this. The support people say, no, do that. The integrator says yet something else. That's really the risk if you're working with a partner where You do not have one throat to choke. In that case, you have to become your own general contractor. You create an internal PMO that will coordinate DBaaS operation, deployment services, and support. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Some companies choose to do that because they want to retain that level of control. But it means you develop the expertise for cloud, for database, and integration technology, and you bridge across and coordinate between vendors. Some companies feel that is a position of strength, that is a responsibility that their technology organization has to the business. And I fully understand and agree with that position. But if you go down this path, make sure that you are staffed, that you have the capabilities to do this. If you don't have those capabilities or don't want to spend money on that, but really want to focus on innovation, then look for a vendor who does it all, who's a single partner for you, who will run this, service this, support it, give you architectural advice. Okay, so that's the second risk, the service risk, and how I would suggest to mitigate that risk. Okay, then, okay, now we're talking about zombies. It's my favorite part. So the question is really, how do you make sure that you're not betting on, let's say, a fork of Postgres that actually is lagging the Postgres development a lot? And you may think, oh yeah, this is just FUD. No, just look around. Just look around for Postgres variants out there, some run by very, very large vendors, some by innovative companies who are years behind the technology. And if you're betting on that, then you are tied down with this. You connected your fate, your progress to this one vendor. And if this one vendor is like, there are really some Postgres DBaaS out there, is years behind, well, then you don't get the innovation that you want, which is the key reason most companies go to the cloud. You don't get things like the latest JSON capabilities. You don't get the merge command, which in our experience is essential to migrating away from Oracle, because so many of the developers have used the merge command. The merge command is in Postgres 15. If you're working with somebody who has no plans to get onto Postgres 15 anytime soon, somebody who is still on Postgres 11 or Postgres 12, okay, then you're stuck. You may think you're on Postgres. You may think that you're on the most innovative database platform out there, but you're not, okay? And then there are some other concerns like, do they support DevOps and deployment automation? In the cloud, you need that. Cloud means scale. Cloud means going fast. And you're not going to go fast at scale if you can't do deployment automation. So, really look at the automation, because that's easy. And again, here I would only work with Postgres leaders. If somebody is not on that pie chart that I showed you before, I would be very wary of saying, oh yeah, I'm going to work with them. Because are they really committed to always be current? They may have a very interesting fork of Postgres, even if it's open source, but you're locked into that vendor. And when that vendor lags behind Postgres, you're not going to get the innovation that you're looking for. So what do you do about that? Think twice about what I call single vendor forks, even if they're open source. Use them when you need them, right? If they have an advantage, a leverage that you want to have, then you use them. But don't automatically go with them just because they sound cool or sexy. And then check the historical track record. Find out how fast did they adopt major releases and minor releases. And just for those that are not steeped in Postgres, major releases is where the innovation happens. Postgres has major releases every year. That's where the new features are introduced. Minor releases are focused on bug fixes and security. In Postgres, they never bring out new features in minor releases. But every year in the fall, when there's the new Postgres major release, that's where innovation happens. So if you're looking at a Postgres vendor, or a vendor who pretends to have Postgres, but it's really a fork of Postgres, and they're on version 12 or version 11 or something like that, or version 13, you're missing out on stuff. Okay, cost risk. Cost, big deal, right? I mean, a lot of people are going to the cloud because they think it's cheaper. Initially, it is much cheaper. It may be much cheaper, okay? But there's a phenomenon that happens in the cloud that is not possible in the data center. That is, you can kind of deal with bad programming or performance issues by just adding more system resources. You wrote a query that kind of pumps, I don't know, that says select star and doesn't limit the number of records that are coming back, and you need tremendous amount of IO. Well, in the data center, you fix the query. In the cloud, you just call, said, get me more IOPS, increase my IOPS from 32,000 to 64,000. See, boss, problem fixed. Well, the cost just doubled. Okay, so it's really easy to add system resources to iron over, let's say, problematic practices and bad designs. Okay, so be very, very aware of that. Again, here, from a mitigation perspective, I would say go with the experts. Make sure that you have somebody that you can work with who will help you optimize those things and who really will advise you on how many IOPS, IO per second, do you really need? What kind of disk do you really need? What kind of CPU do you really need? Because they all cost a lot of money. And very often it's better to kind of tune a little bit, tweak a little bit, than just blindly spend more money for more infrastructure. Do more research, okay? And analyze pricing models. And the devil is in the detail. I'll give you an example here. This is comparing Amazon RDS Postgres and Big Animal from EDB, okay? Now, you may say, okay, I'm just going to look at the compute, which is the thing that's advertised, right? This is a test done with I think an R5, 8 times extra large. Okay, you may say, just look at that and say, oh yeah, well, RDS is actually, in this case, if I just look at that, well, it looks pretty good. I'll go with that. The devil is in the details. That the IO per second on Amazon RDS costs almost twice as much as the same IO per second on Amazon EC2. So depending on how you go, you're going to pay significantly for IO. And that may not be apparent. That will only become apparent once you get the bill. So really understanding how the cost models work and what impacts you and how things, and working with somebody who can help you optimize these things is very, very important. Good. Last one here is the lock-in risk. It's very similar to this technology stagnation. So my zombie slide, okay? It's just here with the cloud, it's a little different. So this is the Hotel California example where, people go in, they never leave. Why don't they leave? Well, if you get into a proprietary fork like Aurora, Alloy, Cockroach, Yugabyte, they're all more or less like Postgres, some more so, some less so, but they're proprietary fork. They're not Postgres. Now, sometimes you have to use them or you want to use them. And, if they give you the right advantage, do it. But you need to understand that if you go with one of them, no other vendor is going to support it. You are locked into that platform. If such a vendor does not adopt new versions of Postgres fast enough, then you don't get those new features. You can read about the features, but you can't get them because you are locked in. Technology or data egress used to be a much bigger problem than it is today, but it is still a problem. That it costs more to get data into out of the cloud than to get data into the cloud. Don't forget about that. And there's also a technology aspect there, which is many cloud vendors with their, let's say, Postgres versions support getting data into Postgres in the cloud, but make it very difficult to get data out again. Yes, you can do a dump and restore, but who has time for a dump and restore? If you have a 1 terabyte database that you want to dump and restore from the cloud to another cloud or to on-prem, a terabyte will easily take you a day, 2, 3, right? So nobody has that kind of downtime available, so you can't get out anymore if the right technology is not there. Now, there's another thing, which is kind of more hidden, not as obvious, and this data gravity. If you're not familiar with that term, I encourage you to Google it, because it's a real thing that happens, and it's important to understand it, because it probably ties you into a cloud vendor even more than technology or the egress cost. Data gravity means that data goes to the cloud because of an application. But once data is somewhere, there are other applications to start using it. Data networks, right? I mean, every customer that I work with has that same problem. And the more data is there, the more apps are there, the more data will get there. So it's a vicious circle. And taking that spaghetti and moving it is really, really hard. Microservices are a very interesting trend to reduce that part of the lock-in risk, okay? But beware, there is a Hotel California effect here with the lock-in in cloud. What do you do to mitigate it? Well, first, use Postgres wherever possible. And real Postgres, like pure Postgres, because pure Postgres runs everywhere, okay? You can have it from EDP, running on Azure, on AWS, soon GCP. You have, let's say, forks of Postgres that are very close to Postgres on all clouds. You can run pure Postgres on-prem, so you maintain as much independence and freedom as possible, okay? As I said, work with providers that have the same Postgres everywhere. EDP is one of them. And then make sure that whatever DBaaS you choose makes it easier to get data in, that's really important, but also to get data out without significant downtime. And if all they support is dump and restore, well, that means downtime. As soon as you go over a couple of hundred gigs, the downtime becomes significant when you dump and restore from the cloud to another cloud. Do they support incremental replication? Do they support change data capture? Those are the questions to ask to reduce the risk of lock-in. Okay, so in summary here, I talked about five risks, but first, let me just make sure here, I am not opposed to go to the cloud, right? Cloud is a really big business for us at EDB, but I believe that if customers understand the risk and are aware of the risk and understand the mitigation strategies, they can get there faster and happier. So as far as the support risk goes, my advice would be stick with the Postgres leaders. Look at that chart, look at the release notes, find out who's actually actively working with Postgres and involved in the project, and only go with companies that do that. Service risk, I'm not in favor of companies becoming their own general contractor just because it means that they're not focusing 100% of their energy on innovation. And as I said, innovation and agility is the #1 reason why companies go to the cloud. Technology stagnation, really, avoid zombies. You can easily recognize them. You just need to read their release notes, ask around a little bit, stay away from them. Cost, cloud FinOps is a real thing. Okay, this is not just when I first heard about it, I thought it was one of those new fantasy consulting terms. It's not, it's a real thing. Cloud cost grows very, very quickly. And if you don't pay attention, and then lock in, use proprietary software when you need it, right? I mean, EDB has EDB Advanced Server, which is Oracle compatible version of Postgres. Yes, it is proprietary. And yes, a lot of customers use it when they want to get off Oracle. But a lot of customers who say, well, that's not my problem. I just want to do new applications. They use standard Postgres from EDB. Okay. And understand data gravity. It's a real thing. Okay. So Allison, I think we have a survey here that we want to run, right?
Absolutely. So we are about to get into our Q&A session. And if you have any questions for Mark, please feel free to ask in the box below. We'll give you guys a few minutes to think of some questions, but in the meantime, we would like to know what matters most to you when choosing your Postgres cloud vendor. So I will be sending out a poll in just a few moments here. So, all right, and the poll is live. And we'll give you guys a couple minutes to answer that poll and also ask us a few questions. Seems like people are starting to put their answers in, and right now, price, convenience, and legacy migration are all three pretty even at the top.
Yeah, I think multiple clouds, the whole concept of intentional hybrid cloud is something relatively new, but we're seeing it more and more from large customers. Like in the past, it was something that happened, like it was a coincidence, right? This department went to AWS, this department went to Azure, etc. Now we're seeing it happen as a strategic intent to make sure that no new lock-in is created.
I will go ahead and end the poll so you can see the results. But in the meantime, I do see a few hand raises. If you have any questions, just go ahead and fill that into the Q&A box below. We'll get to it as soon as possible. But so yeah, the results are pretty exact to what I expected. So price number 1, convenience number 2.
We can't see.
Oh, can you? Oh, sorry about that. Sorry.
Yeah,
there we go. So here are the results, everyone. Price being number 1. Convenience being number 2, legacy migration 3, and lastly, multiple clouds. So that makes sense. And with that being said, we do have a few questions. So I guess we might as well get started with our Q&A session. So the first question we have here is, I've heard about your Oracle migration capabilities on-prem. Are they available in the cloud too?
Yeah. So for those of you that are not familiar with EDB, for many years we've been developing EDB Postgres Advanced Server, and I would say about half of our customers use that. And EDB Postgres Advanced Server is just like PostgreSQL, but it also understands PLSQL and OCI natively. So basically it makes it very easy to get stored procedures, etc., migrated over from Oracle. And answer the question, yes, that is also available on Big Animal, which is our hosted Postgres service that runs Advanced Server and PostgreSQL on Amazon and Azure.
Awesome. Thank you. And we did just get another question, and it says, is your solution compatible with the DBT adapter?
Oh, I only know DBT2, DBT adapter. So maybe just kind of add a little bit more. I mean, I know about DBT2. Just thinking what DBT might be. So if you wouldn't mind adding a wee bit more, then I can answer that question. If not, I'll do it afterwards.
Awesome. We have a few more questions rolling in. So what are the capabilities of EDB? Do you also include streaming data from different hardware directly into the cloud database?
Yeah, so IoT flows are becoming very, very interesting, and the data ingress capabilities of Postgres are becoming very, very good. So I would say yes, but without telling them a little bit more what hardware you're talking about. I mean, we have a number of customers who do large scale IoT applications where they are streaming data from thermostats and other sensors. So I would say yes, but again, hardware is a wide world. So tell me more.
Awesome. So we have a really good question here. It says, what would you consider the single biggest point of choosing to switch between AWS RDS to Big Animal?
I think there's often 3 things. There's the Oracle compatibility, right? When you go to AWS RDS, and if you come from Oracle, you have to rewrite the majority of your store procedures and all the other, let's say, Oracle proprietary things. If you're not coming from Oracle, then I think the fact that that big animal runs on Azure and AWS, and I think another couple of months will be on GCP too. That's a big deal. And then the other part is that, when you work with us, you work with the Postgres company. You work with the people who, invest significantly more than AWS into furthering Postgres, and you're much closer to the Postgres expertise. So if you have a problem, or if you need Postgres to do something that it doesn't do right now, and you have a lot of customers who have that come to us and say, hey, we're happy with Postgres right now, but in 3 years, we want to be able to do the following things. Can you help us figure this out? Like we had a customer, this is probably 6 years ago, who came to us and said, hey, we're going to go to our next generation hardware, which at that time was going to be 32 cores and 64 cores. And we're very worried about wraparound happening. Okay, so can you please focus your energies on making sure that the bloat problem gets improved? Robert Haas and others from our team invested significant amount of time in collaboration with members of the Postgres community to improve how vacuum and bloat worked, so that customers can start working with faster CPUs that create a lot more transactions in shorter time. So the fact that we're the Postgres company and we do nothing else but Postgres is really the biggest advantage. You're on mute. Alison, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. We have a few more questions rolling in, but I'm going to ask like 2 or 3 more because we're running short on time. But the question that we got just now was, I am working with a local public cloud provider, mainly on IaaS. Can Big Animal EDB be leveraged here?
I would say, yeah, let's have a conversation. I mean, I'm not going to promise anything, but yeah, let's talk.
Awesome. All right, another question we have is Postgres in the cloud always managed, or can we also self-manage?
You can self-manage. I mean, we have a large number of customers today who use both PostgreSQL and Postgres Advanced Server on infrastructure as a service on any of the big clouds, right? I mean, so it doesn't have to be. It all depends on what you would like to do. And, for those of you that are not familiar with the self-managed option, it gives you a lot more control than a third-party managed, but it also gives you a lot more responsibility. So if you know what you're doing and if you have the time to do it, it could be a very good option. But if you want to focus your energy again on innovation and looking forward, well, then those are the situations where maybe you want to have a Postgres expert run it for you, and you focus on solving the next business problem.
So we have time for one last question, and that is, you speak a lot about the Postgres expertise of EDB. How does that help me when I use a managed cloud?
The Postgres experts are only a phone call away. So, if you call us and say, hey, yesterday my Postgres was fast, today my Postgres is slow, we're actually going to work with you because, that's what we do. We'll dig in and figure out, okay, what happened, right? Is it a bloat problem? Something else happened? Did the index go bad? What do you need to do, right? Whereas another provider who really just kind of runs Postgres because maybe they're more of an infrastructure provider might say, well, Postgres is up and running, you can connect to it, so what's the problem? Okay. And so that's where I would say that's where the Postgres expertise shows. That's the first thing during the support. And then the second thing is that when you work with us and you say, well, how should I structure my data model? How do I use table spaces in the right way? How do I use the new Postgres index capabilities? How do I do those things? Well, that's what we do. And those questions are still very important, even if you have a managed service, right? A managed service that uses a wrong index or a bad index or has a badly bloated table, well, it's managed, but you won't be happy. So having expertise like that available to you, just a phone call away, I think is going to be really important, especially, if you value your data and the data performance.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mark. So thank you to everyone for spending your time with us today. If you have questions that were not answered, please feel free to contact me. You will also receive a follow-up email after this webinar containing a recording of this webinar. Also, at the end of this webinar, you'll see a survey. If you want to learn more about Big Animal or just hear more from me or Mark himself, we can reach out to you. Just click yes to the survey afterwards, and we'll make sure we contact you guys. Otherwise, thank you so much for your time today. All the attendees, thank you, Mark, as well. And I hope everyone has a great day.